Thank you for your introduction, Carl. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be speaking here today. I will try to keep it short. I will tell a bit about my background, my path of self-study, and my work as an architectural designer. I hope to show that with enough passion and persistence, skipping school can be a possibility. I've always loved music and architecture. I've always loved to draw and design buildings. Here's an example drawn during geography class in high school. Seeing things that disturb you, such as boring modernist buildings, can be a great motivator for action, such as making a counterproposal. You critique by creating. And of course, who hasn't designed their dream house? Why Microsoft Paint, you may ask? Well, Minecraft didn't exist yet. After high school, I went on to study jazz music and trombone in college. Why not architecture, you may ask? Well, one of the most important reasons was that during my last year in high school, a graduate of high school stopped by to show his designs from architecture schools. And I was really sort of horrified to see uninspiring and bland and abstract designs. That's when I knew for certain I'd rather go study music, more fun and more beauty. I finished my bachelor studies in music with a final exam, for which I wrote a composition for a small orchestra inspired by Antoni Gaudi's Sagrada Familia. I had just discovered SketchUp and spent way too much time on making a model for my final exam poster. After graduating, my girlfriend gave me this book as a present, and this is really a must-have for any student of classical architecture. Naturally, we're still together. This showed that she was a keeper. And it's true. I will tell her that you applauded. It's more than 800 pages, and it features essays on 117 architectural treatises. But the heavy book had to stay home. I was off to New York to pursue a master's degree in trombone and jazz music. I finished my studies in Rotterdam, and years full of performing followed. But after some time, my interest in that great book on architectural theory came back, and it led me to buy these two books on Vignola's method on how to draw the orders. It marked the start of beginning to learn the classical language of architecture. First, modeling a Tuscan column, then an entablature, and then turning it into a little temple. I remember the sensation of accomplishment. It's like writing your first little story in a newly learned language. Then I went on to model the Corinthian order, way more challenging, but also more rewarding. And I couldn't resist to model also a Solomonic shaft, also using Vignola's method. As I started to collect books, I was also starting to look online for research articles that I could put inspiration from. After Vignola, I just discovered James Gibbs' rules for drawing the orders. Whenever I have to draw a canonical order today, I go to James Gibbs' books because his illustrations for drawing the orders are just so clear. These books by James Gibbs then inspired me to do an exercise in the Doric order. But the temptation to add more stuff was very big, so I started to collect new books to put inspiration from. For example, this book by Betty Langley, well, he has many books actually, but I looked to this one. Andrea Palladio and Franz Salzmeier. This book you have already seen twice or three times, I think, during this conference. And the whole thing turned into a concert hall facade, and I tried to give myself as many challenges as I could as I went along. For example, modeling forced perspective window surrounds and the slight curve you can see in the Attica gable. Meanwhile, I was doing quite well in music, as I may say in myself. I was sitting in with great orchestras and performing in great halls. Not all the time, but these are, of course, the highlights. One particular highlight was performing in the orchestra and as a soloist on a Grammy Award-winning album. as I was also, next to recording and arranging, I also started to teach trombone and jazz music theory in college in 2014. But especially with this theory class, as I progressed, I strongly got a sense that some essential information had been missing from my own music education. So I decided to go back to school. I went to Graz, not only the birthplace of Austria's most famous bodybuilder, I will quote him later on, that's the reason I put him there, but also a great school for studying music. My composition teacher gave me in my first lesson this motivational book for artists, and one of the chapters is called Do Good Work and Share It with People. I will also quote this later on. A big part of the curriculum were all the classical music theory subjects. And as I progressed into these subjects, I realized that these were the things that I should have learned in the very beginning of my own music studies. I finished these studies with an album recording for which I wrote 10 new compositions that all use classical forms, harmony and counterpoint, but that also allow for some jazz improvisation. For the cover design, I was inspired by two works of architecture that I not only love, but that also broadly mark the beginning and end of an era in which classical architecture was taught and practiced broadly. But after these studies, I developed some health problems and I had to take a step back from music. But this then gave me more time to study architecture. I found this great research article by Dutch professor Koen Ottenheim, who did some great research in proportional design systems in classical architecture. This article and a new Dutch translation of Scamozzi's book on the classical orders, Scamozzi was really big in the Dutch 17th century, inspired me to go for a new design exercise in style and proportion. A city hall inspired by 17th century Dutch buildings such as the Amsterdam Town Hall and the Mauritshuis in The Hague. Meanwhile, in 2018, I was also starting to share my architectural designs and my 3D work on Instagram, inspired by that chapter from that book called Do Good Work and Share It with People. To my surprise, with every new architecture post, I gained new followers that were actual professionals in architecture. Meanwhile, I kept collecting books. This is another must-have for any student of classical architecture, and it inspired me to do some detailed comparative research. And I was looking for digitalized historic books online, and these are some of the places where I found them. If you're unsure what to look at, I can really recommend this page on the website of the Institute for Classical Architecture and Art. It's a fantastic repository of historic architecture titles, and there are links to the respective libraries where you can see and download them. Talking about the ICIA, they have some fantastic lectures online where I also learned a lot and made sure to make some notes on the way. They're all on YouTube. So as I was getting more and more connected with like-minded people online and getting positive feedback from professionals, which gave me some self-confidence, I decided to apply to the Engelsberg Summer School. To my surprise, I was accepted, and little did I know how attending this summer school would completely transform my career. And it's really a powerful thing, just like this gathering is, to have a gathering of like-minded spirits. As I had been sharing some of my 3D work and designs, especially 3D work, with the students and tutors, the organizers approached me. Was I that? Oh, there's the screen. I keep looking at the screen. So, sorry, stupid. They approached me if I wanted to digitalize some of the hand-drawn students' designs for their upcoming book, Building a More Beautiful Borlänge. So here I was. Before I went to the school, I knew no one personally that loved the same thing as I did, at least not in person. And then I went home knowing a whole bunch of like-minded people and going home with an actual commission. 2 months later, Mieke Bosse and Peter Drijver from Scala Architects, who I had met in Engelsberg, commissioned me to design a row of houses for Brandenvoort. Brandenvoort is basically the Dutch Poundbury, to keep it short. So my first real architecture commission. So now, it was now clear to me that I wasn't only a musician anymore. Although meanwhile the music work had returned and I was doing quite a lot of arranging and performing again. But then 2020, you know what happened, the dreaded Corona pandemic. And this coincided with me becoming a father, but now I was a father without work. So I saw only one choice, and that was to go into architectural design. I went to look for help on how to market myself online, and since then Elisabeth Averianova has been helping me with that, and she helped me structure my Instagram, and I started to post a lot. Not long after, a fun commission came in by stone sculptor Koen van Velsen, who lives actually quite close to where I live, to design a pedestal for his sculpture of Pan. In that summer, Mieke Bosse from Scala Architects invited me to become part of the Dutch Board of Inbouw, or the Board of Inbouw Netherlands. And it's great to be part of a global network of professionals in architecture and urbanism. Then, the beginning of 2021, via Instagram, private message on Instagram, came my first own commission. Enlarging a former farm manor house from 1820 with 2 new wings. One problem, though, like in most countries, you can't just do architecture work without a license, for obvious legal and liability reasons. So the solution is, you find an architect that wants to check your work and sign off on your drawings, and that wants to supervise and advise, of course. So that's my lecture in a nutshell. It could have just been those 2 sentences, but thankfully, Scala Architects were glad to help me out with this project. So honestly, the learning curve was immense and the workload huge, but I had never learned so much in such a short period of time. Building in the real world, I discovered, is just so different from designing stuff on paper for fun or in 3D. Hours of material to talk about, but something I'm rather proud of is that I did all the drawings, from the sketches to the permit drawings to all the construction drawings. Then half a year later, summer of 2021, came another pivotal private message on Instagram. The current heir of this castle rediscovered 2 large family crest stones somewhere on the estate. They had been buried beneath plants. And these stones had once adorned these castle gate piers, but the gate piers had been demolished in the 1930s for unknown reasons. His request to reconstruct and rebuild the gate piers at a more appropriate location next to the main road, to design a new wrought iron gate for it, to landscape the area around it, and to design a new gatehouse. Well, how could I say no? So, to get an idea for context, I really like to do a proportional analysis of the nearby existing structures and, of course, of the existing gate piers. And these proportions can then serve as a guide for the new designs. For the wrought iron gate, I tried to match the early 18th century aesthetic of the gate piers. And so I traced my favorite Louis XIV style ironwork examples from this book, and I then distilled my favorite features into a new wrought iron gate design. In the end, though, we had to tone this down a whole lot, but it was a fun exercise. This is a building you all may be familiar with, or some of you will be. Actually, through a fellow student of the Engelsberg Summer School, Ylva Schutte, I was commissioned to work out Albert Svensson's sketches for the capitals in 3D. I distilled his sketches into a friendly-looking Ionic capital with a Greek touch. Talking about the importance of summer schools, they are as much about networking as they are about learning. And as the Engelsberg Summer School had been so important for transforming my career, It's been a delight to give something back and become a co-organizer, founder, and teacher at our Let's Build a Beautiful City summer school in Utrecht. And we actually just closed applications for our 4th edition. I'm almost there. This is one of my latest commissions, located in the east of the countries. A new shed and 2 new houses right next to a farmhouse, from a brick farmhouse from 1924. It's kind of fun to do a full vernacular project after all that classicism. So every new commission is an opportunity to learn many new things, and I really love doing a proper precedent study to get the best possible contextual design. So proportional analysis is something I really love doing. I don't think of these systems as absolute systems for everything, though, but rather as design tools that you can have in your toolbox to be counterbalanced with more intuitive design. Just like when composing music, I think that both of our brain halves matter. So information on these proportional design systems is harder to find than information on the classical orders. So here's a compilation of books that I found particularly helpful in that respect. I'd like to close off this lecture with a series of quotes and principles that I aim to live by, but never succeed, of course. Do good work and share it with people. If I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't stand here today. Then, one by our famous Austrian bodybuilder, ignore the naysayers about staying true to your inner compass. And to close it all off, a quote by one of my heroes, Michelangelo: critique by creating. Visualize the world as you like to see it. Thank you for your attention.